So we're now 2024. We've just had recent riots.
Yep.
Here's a question for you. The mainstream media are calling them race riots. I'm happy to roll with whatever you want to call them for the benefit of this interview. What would you like us to call these riots?
Well, Keir Starmer called them race riots yesterday, didn't he, when he went to Northern Ireland? He called them race riots. And before that, he used a very broad brush to label everybody involved in them as being far right. I don't like lazy labels. They don't fit everyone. And it can be used as a tool sometimes, I think, to suppress conversation, to suppress free speech. And I'm not a fan of that in any way, shape or form. So I'll just stick to riots.
How do you think they started? Without me putting my 2 pence worth in, because I just want to hear it from you.
Okay. If we rewind to July and the events in Terminal 2 at Manchester Airport, you will remember, I hope, that a short clip was released on social media of a police officer kicking a man in the head and stamping on his head. And that clip was only 3 or 4 seconds long. And it understandably caused a lot of outrage and a lot of debate on social media. About 3 or 4 days after that clip had been released, I think we got to see 23 seconds of some of the backstory to the kick in the head and the stamping on that man's head. And what we saw was 2 men lashing out fervently, disgustingly, at police officers and female police officers being punched. And it was widely accepted that one of those police officers had received a broken nose. And then we found out that there was other incidents that took place on an aeroplane and other incidents that took place in a Starbucks before the footage that we've seen. There has been no footage released from the aeroplane or from Starbucks. So we still do not have the full picture in regards to what led to the events that we have seen. So nothing's been resolved. No charges brought yet. But that whole situation and the reaction to it, because 2 of the men that we saw brutally breaking a woman police officer's nose and lashing out like lunatics, were brown-faced men. And, of course, we need to understand and not duck the issue that there are many people in this country, in fact, I would contend there are millions of people in our country who work hard, raise decent kids, pay their taxes, obey the law, and otherwise contribute to society, that harbour deep concerns about unfettered, illegal immigration into this country. I believe that many of those people also harbour concerns about the rise of Islam in the UK, fundamental Islamism, or Islamists, should I say, that they are concerned about, and a lack of integration by certain communities who do not appear to integrate into the UK. Reform got 4.1 million votes. Much of their platform was arguing about immigration. I therefore think it entirely reasonable and quite probably the truth that millions of people, and beyond the Reform voters, have concerns about the aforementioned things. So that, Manchester Airport, for me, laid the fuse. It laid the fuse, and I was so convinced that major disorder was going to happen that I jumped on social media and I said, social cohesion is hanging by a thread. Suppressing the truth will not help. Don't say I didn't warn you. And what I mean by suppressing the truth is that we could have seen police officers' body-worn videos long before that longer clip was released. Greater Manchester Police could have broken with protocol, could have sensed the feeling in the nation and could have put some of that out there to try and give backstory, context, dare I say it, truth about matters that led up to the police officer kicking and the stamping. And while I'm dealing with that, having done policing for quite a while myself, I have to say I find it very hard to find any justification for what that police officer did. Although, of course, I think we always need to remember that policing will never be perfect. And it will never be perfect because it's full of people. And people have flaws and people make mistakes and people get things wrong. That said, I would also like to see the Starbucks footage and any footage from the aeroplane. But that remains my position. So, that laid the fuse. Then, of course, we had the ghastly events of Southport on what for many was the first day of the kids' summer holidays. I'm a father of 3, all right, they're all grown up now. But you'd sit there as the summer holidays approach thinking, right, what are we going to do? So when are we going to be able to go on holiday? Can we afford it? Where are we going to go? What clubs can we get them into? What sport are they going to do? What days out can we have? Because you want to keep your kids amused, occupied, entertained, inspired during the long summer holidays. Imagine the excitement that must have been coursing through the veins of those beautiful young children as they were going to go to a Taylor Swift-themed dance and yoga event. I bet those girls were as excited could be at the very prospect of it. For that event to turn into such murderous bloodshed is, of course, vile beyond compare. But somebody has been charged in connection with that offence. I regard myself as a responsible broadcaster, so I'm not going to say anything more about it. We will have to wait and see. We will have to let justice run its course. Not long after those appalling events, somebody, and I would say probably a hostile actor to the UK, put out a tweet saying that a 17-year-old man called Ali al-Shakiri, who had come to the UK on a boat, like many other migrants into the UK that wash up at Dover every day, almost every day, had carried out the attack, and that he was therefore an illegal immigrant and the subject of interest by the security services. I can't remember whether they said MI6 or MI5, but that in essence was the tweet. In other words, naming somebody that they were saying was responsible for that attack, an illegal immigrant subject to interest from the security services. All of which was completely and utterly untrue. Not a word of that was true. But of course, once it's out there, we know what the internet's like. We know what social media is like. And it spread like wildfire, unfortunately. And I think it raised a lot of tension and a lot of concerns because emotions were running extremely high. I think just about everybody in the nation must have been touched in some way or another by hearing the dreadful news of that abominable attack. Then what happened was that the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, Serena Kennedy, held a press conference because, yes, the 17-year-old had been arrested and she confirmed that. And she said that this 17-year-old was, and I quote, originally from Cardiff. Those were the exact words she used. Then what happened was people did their own digging, including the media. Now, to my mum, bless her, she's 95, and we are still the most incredibly lucky family to still have her. to people like my mum, and I think some others, probably of my age or a bit older, when you say a 17-year-old from Cardiff, people might conjure up an image of a flame-haired rugby player who sings in a male voice choir. Now, I know they're cliches, but to some people, that's the sort of image that they might conjure up. What, of course, was later discovered was that the 17-year-old, originally from Cardiff, was born in the UK to Rwandan immigrant parents. They might have come here entirely legitimately. We know nothing about them. But I think many people perceived the Chief Constable's originally from Cardiff as being sleight of hand. Like it was something that she was saying, perhaps almost as a distraction. Now, she might well say, actually, I said it for clarity purposes, because strictly speaking, what she said was the truth. But because there was nothing else behind it, because there was no mention of the parents being from Rwanda, for example, I think when people discovered that, they then thought, again, is there some suppression of the truth here? Is the establishment, in the face of a chief constable, trying to suppress the truth in some way, shape or form? So the fuse was laid by Manchester Airport, and the sparks were created by that entirely false tweet that went around, and people thinking that the Chief Constable of Merseyside was perhaps being a bit underhand and not perhaps as forthright as she otherwise could have been. And I think they were the sparks that lit the fuse that then encouraged people stupidly, very, very stupidly, to go and throw bricks at police officers, to knock down people's front walls and launch bricks at mosques, for example. And we know what all the other law-breaking that went on, including from a clip that I saw where I believe somebody was trying to set fire to a Holiday Inn in Tamworth. So then, of course, we had Keir Starmer holding his first press conference with regards to the riots. And of course, famously, with a very broad brush, labelled the riots far right.
Farage riots were trending. Now, do you think Nigel Farage played any part in inciting those riots?
That title to the riots was given by a radio presenter who is the most sanctimonious person I have ever had the misfortune of listening to. Ludicrous.
It's a shocking accusation.
Yeah, it is, and it's, again, inaccurate. We have a problem in this country in that people who harbour concerns, like I've said, illegal immigration, the rise of Islam, and a lack of integration, will be lazily called far right or racist, which is complete and utter nonsense for so many people. All right, I'm sure there are some racists who have concerns about illegal immigration, the rise of Islam, and a lack of integration, but not everyone. I know so many people that harbour those concerns, and they are fine, law-abiding, upstanding members of the community. But you know what? They'd be afraid to have that discussion in a pub. And I think now what we've seen post the riots, with this huge mobilisation of the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, the courts and the prisons to lock up rapidly, quickly, effectively so many people, I wish they'd do it for knife crime. I wish they'd do it for shoplifting. Nobody died in the riots. 3 people died of knife crime this weekend alone. Imagine what the nation might look like if there was a huge mobilisation of police officers with as much political will and policing vigour put into tackling knife crime. Imagine how many stop and searches 6,000 police officers could do if they went to those cities of ours that are so blighted, that have a tide of teenage blood flowing through them. Imagine how effective that might be against knife crime. Look at our high streets, so many of which are blighted by people walking into shops and helping themselves with those huge great laundry bags and holdalls that they fill up with alcohol, and some jump behind the ramp and nick all the cigarettes and the joints of beef and all the other expensive things, and then walk out without challenge and steal with impunity, turning people away from going to the high street. And then, of course, another huge matter of great concern, because the 3 people that I mentioned murdered this past weekend, all women. The stats last week, 50% increase in assaults against women on the underground system, the transport network, the buses, the tubes, the trains, let alone the streets, where women are harassed and assaulted and worse on a daily basis. Imagine if there was the political and the policing will to mobilise 6,000 officers to try and tackle those issues. Imagine how better the UK might become in a very short space of time. They've shown they could do it for the riots, and they had to. Well, let's have that political will. Oh, but hang on. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said just the other day, we're going to halve knife crime in a decade. Well, you stopped the riots in a week. So why can't you halve knife crime in perhaps a month of really concerted effort, which you keep going, so that police officers patrolling the streets do not remain a thing of the past, but become a thing of the present, so that we have deterrence, so that people see police officers, they are visible, people might get to know them. They might actually get to like them. They might actually get to say good morning or good afternoon to them. They've shown they can do it for the riots. Let's do it for women, girls, shopkeepers, and people who are too frequently getting stabbed to death. Let's do it for them as well, shall we?